Hello everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Destiny video. Today Fantasy Flight released a few more spoilers for Legacies. These all come from various content creators in the Star Wars Destiny community. So there will be links in the description below where you can check out all of their articles. We're going to just go ahead, take a look at the cards, going to give my thoughts on them. So first card up here, we have Fragmentation Grenade. One resource, villain red equipment weapon. 5 damage sides on this thing, so this thing's pretty cool. So one indirect damage, one indirect damage, one indirect damage, two indirect damage, three indirect damage, and a blank. And after this die is resolved, discard this upgrade from play unless you pay one resource or spend a resource. So pretty cool right there. You're probably going to want to pair this with somebody that can focus it to its 3 damage side, or hopefully that you just maybe roll out the 3 and then resolve it, do 3 indirect damage. If you have a resource, you can spend the resource to keep it in play. I think that's pretty cool. I like that it's a repeatable effect, so you can resolve it, and if you have a resource, you get to spend that resource, and then the grenade stays in play. It's also very, very thematic because it's like you throw a grenade, you get another grenade, you throw that, you get another one, and so on. So, like I said, pair this with anybody that has focus. So let's say you roll a blank or a 1 indirect damage side, you can focus it into the 3 damage side. Or somebody like Thrawn possibly, or Tarkin, maybe have this on one of their, like another character, maybe even 2 of it. So you roll that character out with 2 of these grenades, and then you use Tarkin's double focus to focus both of the grenades into the 3 indirect damage side, and then resolve that for 6 indirect damage. So the potential damage on these for one resource is pretty big. And then also, I like that you can just pay a resource to keep it in play, especially if you're playing with a deck or a character that has good resource generation. So Thrawn has like the double resource side. I think Tarkin can make resources as well, and other characters you can play him with can also make resources. So if you have this in a deck, maybe with a Stormtrooper, and you have something like Drudge Work, you can Drudge Work one of the Stormtroopers or one of the other characters and get that resource to spend to keep the grenade in play. So that is the Fragmentation Grenade. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Callus's Bow Rifle. Villain Red Weapon, Legendary. 3 resources, 2 range damage, 4 plus 4 range damage for a resource, plus 3 melee damage, plus 3 melee damage, resource, and blank. It also has ambush, which is pretty nice, so you get that extra action after you roll it. So we saw Zeb's bow rifle yesterday, now we're looking at Callus's. So kind of similar sides, except Callous does have the 1 regular 2 range damage, while all of the sides on Zeb's dice were modified with the exception of the resource. But ambush is good on this. It also has some pretty strong sides. So let's say like you have like a 2 range on like a range on Callus, and then this plus 4, spend that resource, resolve a ton of damage. I also like that it has a resource, so you can use it with, if you're playing with red and yellow, you have access to bait and switch. So you bait and switch, flip this to the plus 4, unless you already had a die showing range, and then you can just resolve all of that damage as well. So I think the cost is good. So 4 damage sides, ambush for 3 resources, seems like a pretty cool weapon. I'm looking forward to trying to get this and maybe build, not sure who I would put it on, maybe Callus, maybe some other character. Pair that character maybe with somebody that can, like focus this to his most damaging side. Like I said, like Thrawn or Tarkin and Thrawn just keep coming to mind because of how much focus they both have on their dice. But let's say you use Thrawn's or Tarkin's double focus or Thrawn's double focus, either one, and you focus, let's say, a character to range damage, and then you focus this to the plus 4, and then you spend that resource, and then you have just a ton of damage. So that is Callus's bow rifle. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have the ETA-2 Interceptor, a blue hero vehicle. So not a lot of vehicles in blue, at least on hero, or I don't think really in general. There's a few on each side, but not a whole lot. Vehicles generally mostly being red or yellow. But 3 resources, 1 range damage, 2 range damage, 3 indirect damage, shield, resource, and blank. And then an action, remove this die or one of your dice showing a shield to exhaust a support. So that ability right there is interesting. So if you roll a blank on this, you can just remove that die to make sure your opponent can't roll out one of the supports unless they maybe play something like strategic planning to ready it. 3 damage sides, so you have a 1, a 2, and a 3. That's pretty good. And then again, you could also I like that you can also remove just another shield die as well. So if you're running this in a like a Qui-Gon deck maybe or a shield deck, and you already have enough shields on Qui-Gon, let's say you have 2 shield dice showing, you can remove one of them, exhaust one of your opponent's supports. Now the ability here, the action is going to be dependent on or your opponent actually playing a deck that has supports that can be exhausted, like vehicles and things like that. If your opponents aren't playing vehicles, this action isn't really that useful. But then you still do have the 3 damage sides. You still have the ranged and the indirect sides on it as well. I'm not sure if cost is maybe too high for what it is, especially because the action is a little situational. So again, like I said, if you're not playing a deck that's using supports, that action isn't going to really help you at all. But this has been the ETA2 Interceptor. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have the Camouflage Rifle. 3 resources, red hero weapon. 3 range for a resource, plus 3 range. 1 shield, 1 resource, special and blank. Special is deal 2 damage to a character or 3 damage instead if you control the battlefield. This might be a little bit overcosted, I think. I think this would be better at 2. Maybe have this be rework it a little bit, have it be 2 cost, and have it maybe be 1 range or 2 range instead of the 3 for a resource. I do like that we have the plus 3, and the special seems pretty interesting as well. Especially if you are claiming the battlefield every round, you're going to be able to get 3 damage off of the special, or if you have a way to kind of switch the battlefield control in the middle of the game. I don't know if Hero has that ability yet. I know Villain can do it with like the Grand Moff title and stuff like that. I don't know if Hero has that ability, but 3 might be a little bit high, especially because 1 regular damage side on it is a resource costed side. I'm not sure how I feel about that because we're paying 3 resources, and then you do have the 3 range damage for a resource. Even though 3 for a resource generally is pretty good, I wish this maybe had a 2 instead of that. And the plus 3 is fine, and the rest of the sides, the shield, resource, and special are fine. I also like the special. The special, it's going to hit for 2, and maybe you'll get 1 more damage out of it if you have the battlefield. I'm just going to have to wait and see how this card plays out. I think it could be interesting, especially if you are playing it in a deck where you do have constant battlefield control. Like you're running just a very fast deck, where you're going to be able to get that extra damage from the special. This has been the Camouflage Rifle. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Rebellion Leader, 4 resources, hero red upgrade title, 2 indirect damage, 2 focus, 3 focus, 2 discard, 3 shields, 2 resources, unique red character only, and a power action. So power action, remove an opponent's die showing the same symbol as one of your dice. That could be potentially a pretty strong effect. So once per round, you'll be able to remove any of your opponent's dice, or one of them at least, as long as it has a symbol showing on one of your dice as well. So if you roll in range damage, you'll be able to power action to remove one of your opponent's dice showing range damage. If you roll indirect, you'll be able to remove one of your dice showing indirect, and so on. I don't think it's quite as strong as the Grand Moff title, because that power action is pretty crazy, where you can essentially get the effect of the battlefield or switch it out. But I do like it has no blanks. It costs 4, so it's kind of expensive. So it might be something that you overwrite to get into, play as like a 2-cost weapon on them, or another 2-cost upgrade, and then overwrite into this. But I do like you have the 2 indirect damage, good focus, good discard, and a good amount of shield. So I can see this going well in a deck with like C-3PO, for example, and whatever you need this thing to do. Let's say you roll 3 focus, you turn it into 3 discard, or 3 damage, or like 3 resources, whatever you need. This card I can see being played a lot in decks using 3 C-3PO. So, pretty cool card here. Funny thing is, it's called Rebellion Leader. Shouldn't the artwork be Mon Mothma? Even though Bail Organa is like right up there with her. So, also really like the artwork. Bail Organa I think it's like a really cool character. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. Again, I don't think it's as good as Grand Moff, but this is kind of the hero version of that. So we have less damage sides than the Imperial version or the villain version. Then we also have a 2, a 3, a 2, a 3, and a 2 for everything else. So tons of resources, tons of shields, good amount of discard, and just incredible amounts of focus with this card. So that is Rebellion Leader. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have the Jetta Partisan, 8 health for 8 points. Again, you hit that 1-to-1 ratio. One thing I really like with Legacies, from what I've seen so far at least, is there's a lot of characters that have that 1-to-1 health to point cost. So this is an 8 for 8. I think there's other characters that are like 12 for 12 and so on. So I'm really liking that they're doing that. And because I always think that is a good balance. So if you get a character out or you get health for what you paid for it, that's pretty cool. So let's look at the size here. So we have 2 indirect damage, 2 indirect damage, disrupt, discard, resource, and blank, and then this ability. So after you deal indirect damage to an opponent for the first time each round, you may discard the top card of the deck. So you're obviously going to run this in a deck that runs a lot of indirect damage. Every round, first time you do indirect, you get a discard a card. Then they also have their the discard side on their dice as well, and then of course indirect damage as well as disrupt and resources. Could be a pretty cool character. I think you can run this with, like, let's say you're running Elite Saw with one of these, so you have him at 16 points, this at 8, bringing you to 24. You can then slot in a 6-point character from like the draft pack, like a Jawa or something like that. That could be pretty interesting. I do like that they're making these, again, these characters that have these abilities that trigger like once per round do this. So with this character, you're probably going to be dealing a ton of indirect damage, especially with Saw, because Saw is going to be dealing his special deals and indirect damage, and then this character has those 2 indirect sides as well, so you'll be able to discard whenever you do indirect damage, first time each round, discard a card. So I think this could work well in a mill deck. Maybe even put this in a Riken deck. Have shields on these characters. When you roll Riken in, he deals damage, and then, or when you roll Riken in, they mill, I should say. And then when these guys do damage, they'll also mill a card, or at least once per round, mill another card, which could be pretty interesting. So that's the Jetta Partisan. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Dark Scheme, Blue Villain Event, 1 resource. Look at the top 5 cards of an opponent's deck, discard one of them, and place the rest on top of their deck in the order of your choice. This could be interesting. So you pay 1, you look at the top 5 cards, you get to discard one of them. So whatever is like their best card out of those top 5, you discard it, and then you get to actually stack the other 4 in whatever order that you want. So of course you put like maybe like the most useful thing at the bottom and the most useless card to them at the moment at the top. You're also then getting information about what they may have in their hand later in the game, or later even potentially in that same round that they're drawing cards with some kind of effect or something. So if you're playing, let's say, 2-player Kylo, you play this, discard a card, and then you see what cards are coming up, and you also see what colors they are. Or if you're playing this with Thrawn, you'll be able to see the next 5 cards. You get rid of 1, and then you can make a mental note of the resource cost of the other 4. So once they draw those, you activate Thrawn, and then choose the number that you just saw when you were looking through the top 5 cards. So Dark Scheme could be pretty interesting. I think it's a good way to see what they have coming up, both in color and in resource cost. And then also, whatever their best card is, you can just get rid of it by discarding it. So that is Dark Scheme. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Taking Ground. This is a plot, so we haven't seen any plots since Legacies was announced about a month or 2 ago, or however long it was. They revealed a couple plots there, and now this is the first plot we've seen since then. So Taking Ground, it's going to cost 2 character points. So again, the way plots work is you build up your team, and whatever points you have left over, you can use for plots. So if you have say a 28-point team, to make that 30 points, you use one of these plots, and that fills in those 2 points. So let's say you're running Elite Palpatine at 28, you can run Taking Ground for 2 more. you then have a 30-point build because you have 28 points in characters and 2 points in plots. So it's kind of like a way to make use of those points that you didn't actually use with characters. So again, what this does is add 2 to the value of your roll for the battlefield during setup. So you roll off for the battlefield. If you have this plot in play, whatever you rolled gets, you add 2 to that. This could be really interesting, especially if you're playing on a battlefield that you really need to be on. Even though they can obviously switch the battlefield later with like new orders or hyperspace jump and cards like that. This is a cool way to kind of give you a slight edge in hopefully winning that battlefield roll. Or like I said, again, if you're playing Palpatine, where you're only rolling 2 dice, this might give you those 2 extra points that you need to win that battlefield roll. Or if you're rolling a character that really doesn't have that great of sides, like it has like a lot of 1s and 2s, this is a nice way to kind of just give you a couple extra points toward the battlefield. So that is taking ground. We're going to move into our next card. And the final card revealed today was the Pentronki Arena, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Geonosis. Claim, deal 1 indirect damage to yourself to deal 1 unblockable damage to a character. So you're taking damage here, but you're also then doing unblockable damage. So if you're playing against a deck that a character that is shielded up, you can get through those shields with this unblockable damage. I also think this battlefield is going to be really situational, so I think I can really only think of one character that would kind of benefit from it right now, and that would be Dr. Aphra. So with Dr. Aphra, once you deal indirect damage to yourself, you're able to draw a card. So claim the battlefield, deal 1 indirect damage to Aphra, draw a card off her ability, and then do 1 indirect damage. So that could really kind of like combo well because you're going to damage your opponent, you're going to trigger her thing, you're going to get to draw and also get to draw a card as well. So that could be pretty cool. Or if you are playing this in a deck that uses something like Grand Moff, and again, let's say you're playing Aphra and a red character, and you have Grand Moff on the red character, the unique red character, you can Grand Moff, power action once per round, you get to use the claim effect. So you use the claim effect on the arena, deal 1 unblockable or 1 indirect damage to Aphra, draw her card, and then do damage to do 1 unblockable damage to a character, and then later in the round you can then claim the battlefield again, or actually claim it as your action and do that process again, because Grand Moff lets you use the effect of the battlefield, where you get the claim effect, but you don't actually claim it. So Grand Moff could be a good way to trigger battlefields multiple times, or at least twice, because it's a like a once per round power action. So this, you get to use that power action, do the claim, and then actually then you're possibly going to be able to claim the battlefield later in that round as well. So the arena could be interesting, especially if you're playing it in a deck with Aphra or any character that states, I'm sure there'll be characters in the future that say when you assign indirect damage to them, do something. Aphra lets you draw a card. There might be one that says when this character takes indirect damage, or when you assign indirect damage, gain a resource, maybe. Something like that. So this could be a cool arena to look out for in the future. If I get Dr. Aphra, this could be a card I'm definitely going to want to try out with her. So that's going to do it for today's video. I'll leave a link in the description to where you can check out all the content creators. So we have SW Destiny, the Star Wars Destiny Facebook group, and the Hyperloops that these spoilers all came from. There'll be links in the description to where you can check all them out. Again, that's going to do it for this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. And remember that giveaway for the Monolith Ultimate Guard deck box is still going on, as well as the packs of Star Wars Destiny that go along with it. And there'll be a link to that in the description as well. Again, I want to thank everybody for watching, and take care.